Week 8 running back tier list. Today we're breaking down my top 36 running backs, going through all the major injuries, everything you guys should need to know to set your running back lineups. It is Saturday morning as I'm recording this. If any news breaks after I've recorded this, I'll drop it down below in the pinned comment. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Starting with bye weeks. There are no teams on bye this week, so all 32 teams are in action, which means that you guys should have a lot of options at the running back position and at your flex positions in general. Into the injuries that we got to talk about, I would say generally speaking, this is a pretty healthy week for the running back position. Only a couple major injuries to talk about, and we're starting to get some players talking about coming back soon who have been out for significant periods of time. The only real major injury we have to talk about is Travis Etienne, running back of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Ian Rappaport reporting that he is a game-time decision for Week 8. Doug Peterson came out and said that in his press conference. He practiced in a limited capacity pretty much all week. And Ian Rappaport basically also said that he has a higher shot of playing this week than he did last week. Of course, last week he was ruled out and Tank Bigsby got a big-time workload. But Rap Sheet also did mention that if he plays, it'll probably be in some kind of limited capacity. So Tank Bigsby is definitely a guy that you maybe want to fire up again this week. Not a whole lot of major injuries other than that. I mean, Tajay Spears is banged up. Jerome Ford probably out for the Browns. There's a couple other injuries that aren't really that consequential. So let's talk about some of the guys that could be returning soon. And that's Jonathan Brooks, running back of the Carolina Panthers. Of course, tore his ACL his final year at Texas. Could be making his return in Week 9. It looked like he might have been able to come back this week, listed officially as doubtful, so it looks like next week will be the week that he makes his debut, and that will be another big week in terms of a workload for Chuba Hubbard. Christian McCaffrey reportedly coming back in Week 10. Very good chance, according to Ian Rappaport, so keep that in mind for Jordan Mason as well. Same goes for Kareem Hunt. Isaiah Pacheco leaning towards a Week 10 to 11 return. That's generally a pretty uniform timeline for a lot of the fantasy doctors I've seen, so it looks like we're going to have, 2 more games, I would say, of Kareem Hunt before Isaiah Pacheco really starts to come into the fold. So keep that in mind with Hunt if you do have a winning record, maybe trying to offload him off of your team. And then Keaton Mitchell also has returned to practice, opening up his practice window. He will likely be back in Week 9 or in Week 10. An explosive back, obviously very efficient last year. Just Devon Achane was more efficient on a yards per carry basis. Derrick Henry having a great season, of course. I'm sure he's not going to eat into the workload very much, but he is an interesting contingency play. Derrick Henry's older. If he breaks down as the season goes along, definitely an interesting play there. So let's talk about the running back tier list now. The locked-in running back starts, as I do every single week. Running backs 1 through 12, I kind of just skim over them because I'm sure you guys know you should be starting them. But I do like to break down who has good matchups, who's in a high-scoring game, who has bad matchups, who's in good matchups this week. We have Kenneth Walker, my RB2 on the week, facing the Buffalo Bills. They are 32nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position, which is schedule adjusted. So very, very good matchup for Kenneth Walker there. Jordan Mason versus the Dallas Cowboys, 31st against the run, so very good matchup for him. J.K. Dobbins versus the Saints, 30th. Josh Jacobs versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, 29th. Breece Hall versus the New England Patriots, 25th. Joe Mixon versus the Colts, 23rd. Of course, he had a big game against them in Week 1. Devon Achane against the Arizona Cardinals, 20th. So all of those guys inside my top 12 have very good matchups. Elite running backs in high-scoring games. It would be less time-consuming for me to tell you who is not in a high-scoring game because every running back in my top 12 is in an over-under game of at least 45 points. The highest over-under game of the slate is the Jacksonville Jaguars at Green Bay Packers. So the Packers, Josh Jacobs has the highest scoring game environment of the slate, but Derrick Henry, 44.5 point over-under against Cleveland is one of the lower ones, and J.K. Dobbins, 40.5 points against the Saints. Those are the only 2 games of all these top 12 running backs that are under 45 point over-under. So very high scoring game environments for a lot of these guys this week. Elite running backs that are in bad matchups. So temper expectations for some of these guys. Of course, Kyren Williams already played, but the Vikings were second against the run coming into that game, and he had a great game, caught a lot of passes, scored a touchdown. That type of thing, we know what Kyren Williams does. Derrick Henry versus the Browns, they're more of a pass funnel defense. You prefer to pass against them than you do run, but they haven't seen a rushing offense like the Baltimore Ravens yet, so I'd imagine Derrick Henry will be just fine. And then Saquon Barkley versus Cincinnati. Again, high over-under game, so I'm not really worried that the Bengals are technically a top 10 run defense according to adjusted fantasy points allowed. I do like to highlight a guy or two from this tier as well, just to talk about like usage trends and, maybe buy lows and sell highs and things like that. My running back 1 on the week is Breece Hall, and he is my running back 1 now this week and rest of season. And Todd Downing taking over as play calling and Devontae Adams coming in to help the offense out are all great signs for Breece Hall. He has posted back-to-back 21 plus PPR point weeks, top 6 weeks of fantasy points that he's put up. He has been absolutely spectacular the last 2 games, 86 and 82% of the snaps. He's getting all the carries, all the routes. Since Todd Downing has taken over the play calling, he is just getting peppered targets and peppered usage. He has the best workload in the NFL, bar none. You can see the utilization score there beside the PPR points, 9.7 and 9.4, giving him a 9.1 utilization score on the year. A lot of people were panicked week 4 and 5. I hope you guys bought low on Breece Hall because he is the RB1 rest of the season. Again, the only guy that can contend for this is Christian McCaffrey once he comes back. RB6 for me on the week is Bijan Robinson, who was also similarly one of the best buy lows just a couple of weeks ago. He has posted back-to-back 23 PPR points per game performances. Again, not as great of a workload as Breece Hall is dealing with, but 9.3 utilization score last week, 7.5 the week before. So in week 4-5 period when people were panicking on him, I hope you bought low on Bijan Robinson, and he's probably going to have another good performance against the Bucs. RB7 for me in my rankings is Devon Achane, the current best buy low in fantasy. So if you didn't listen to me about Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, and you want a running back to buy low right now, Devon Achane is the guy. Has not produced more than 11 PPR points since week 2. Of course, in week 1, when Tua was healthy at 23 PPR points, was the RB3 on the week. In week 2, Tua played half that game. He ended up getting a lot of targets towards the end of it, 29.5 PPR points. Since then, he has not been productive at all. But if you want to go buy low on a running back, you're 6-1, you're 7-0, you're 5-2. You need some upside late season. Doesn't get better than Devon Achane. So let's move into the high-end RB2s. I go through 6 by 6. I break down my running back rankings and kind of usage trends and how their matchups line up. Of course, if I talk about somebody RB16 and RB22 and you're deciding between the two guys, obviously I would play my RB16 over my RB22. So running back 13 for me is Aaron Jones. He actually already played, 26th ranked Los Angeles Rams defense, only at 11.5 PPR points. He didn't end up finding the end zone. Otherwise, likely a better game from Aaron Jones. But for the most part, he's going to be ranked as a high-end RB2, low-end RB1 for me every single game. Running back 14 in my rankings is Kareem Hunt, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders this week. They are 27th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. So this is a top 6 matchup for Kareem Hunt, and he has been outstanding the last 2 games. You can see 18.7 and 22.3 PPR points, back-to-back top 10 weeks as well, and over 23 opportunities in both games as well. So he's getting a big workload. He's getting the goal line work. He's getting everything under the sun for the Kansas City Chiefs, really outside of long down and distance and 2-minute drill snaps where Samaje Perine plays. The Raiders are an easy matchup for Hunt in week 8. It is worth noting that the Raiders are generally pretty close games with the Chiefs. It looks like the Raiders are always the inferior team, and then inevitably they usually split and win a game every year against the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll see how DeAndre Hopkins affects the offense, but they've been rather run heavy the last couple of games since Kareem Hunt got there. They are 21st in neutral pass rate in the last 4 weeks at just 47%. So with Isaiah Pacheco expecting to be back around week 10 to week 11, enjoy the production if you need it. If you guys need wins, you're 2-5 or whatever. But if you're in a good position and you don't actually need Kareem Hunt for the most part, I think you should probably sell high on him and sell him to somebody that does need the production. But I do like him to have a good week this week, which is why I like him to go higher than 80.5 rushing plus receiving yards. He has been over this total in pretty much every game that he has played as the starting running back this year. So definitely go and take that. We are going to be building out a pick'em entry throughout this video, as we always do. Running back 15 in my rankings is James Cook, running back of the Buffalo Bills. Also a team that has been very run heavy this year. 14th running back defense versus the Seattle Seahawks. He has been banged up for a few games now. His workload hasn't been great since week 5 when he had a top 10 week and then injured his toe with that turf toe injury he's been dealing with. This is the first week since week 5 that he's not on the injury report. He was on the injury report all last week. Of course, he missed week 6 with the turf toe injury. So I actually like him to go higher on his total yardage. He would have hit this total in 4 of the last 5 games prior to last week where he was limited against the Titans. Market perceptions generally seem a little bit low for James Cook. So if you are looking for a trade target, I do think he is a decent option to go after. 47-point over-under in this game, 92% of the cash on the over. And the Seahawks are without DK Metcalf, so a good chance that the Bills are a ball control type of team in this game. Running back 16 for me on the week is Alvin Kamara, running back of the New Orleans Saints. 3rd ranked defense are the Los Angeles Chargers against the run. So not an easy matchup here. Make sure you guys roster Kendre Miller because apparently Alvin Kamara has been playing through a broken hand, a broken rib. I don't exactly know what his health status is. It seems that he's, practicing for the most part and he's going to play through this stuff. We do have one more week likely of Spencer Rattler playing quarterback, and then we should have Derek Carr back in week 9 is what most fantasy doctors are projecting. Maybe week 10 at the very latest. At least Chris Olave will be out there this week to help out the offense a little bit. It's not a great game environment. It's a tough defense. 40.5 point over under, top 3 run defense against fantasy RBs. Normally a guy that I have ranked in the RB1 range, but given the offense's, struggles with Spencer Rattler, the fact that there's no bye week, so there's a lot of other running backs that rank ahead of him, and it's a bad matchup, I got to knock Alvin Kamara down to the mid RB2 range here. Running back 17 for me in my rankings is Jonathan Taylor, also probably lower than he normally would be, but the Houston Texans are first against fantasy running backs, so the worst matchup in the league bar none. Jonathan Taylor also coming back from a 3-game absence due to a high ankle sprain, so I don't know if he's going to get his full workload necessarily. The Texans did shut him down back in week 1, and the Texans really shut down every fantasy running back that they see. Nobody has been better against the fantasy running back position. Is a solid game environment, so that Jonathan Taylor has that going for him. 46 point over under. Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor can be a dangerous duo in the backfield once they get going, but Jonathan Taylor a little bit worried about the workload because he's coming off of a multi-week absence. Maybe we see a little bit more Tyler Goodson than we normally would. Maybe we see a little bit of Trey Sermon like we normally wouldn't when Jonathan Taylor is out there. Running back 18 for me in my rankings here, closing out this tier, is David Montgomery, which is, about league average matchup versus the Tennessee Titans. They're 16th against fantasy running backs, although they have been really good as of late. Difficult matchup on the ground for them. The Lions, though, are an 11.5 point favorite, and when David Montgomery's primary job is to score touchdowns and bang between the tackles, it's a good spot or a good game environment for David Montgomery to do that. It's a good game environment for him to close this one out in the fourth quarter. The Lions are implied for 28.25 points against one of the stingiest defenses in the NFL from a total yardage standpoint. So that says a lot about their offensive projection week over week. And even after suffering a knee injury in last week's game, it seems like it was minor. David Montgomery has not missed any practice this week, hasn't even been listed on the injury report for anybody curious. So I like him to find the end zone. If you guys are looking for another pick'em entry or a pick'em slip to put in here, I like David Montgomery to have higher than a rushing/receiving touchdown. I believe his anytime touchdown odds on most books are like -120. So this might go away soon or might get adjusted down to like a 0.89x or something like that. But I still like it even at that price tag. DeAndre Swift, next running back we're going to talk about here. My running back 19 on the week. 8th rated defense versus the Washington Commanders. They were a lot worse against the run until a couple of weeks ago. They've kind of tightened up a little bit. Swift was a sell high for me as well before the bye week, and he still is, to be honest, because the Bears had 3 of the easiest matchups in the NFL before the bye for the running back position, and now they have one of the toughest schedules rest of season for the running back position. So that being said, post-bye rookie bump season for Caleb Williams could be an absolute movie. We have Rome Odunze hopefully starting to play better as well. I think this offense is coming into form, and Washington is an exploitable defense, especially in a game that does not feature Jaden Daniels. I think the Bears could really control this one, and DeAndre Swift is a great candidate to find the end zone and post a solid day this week. Next up, we have Javonte Williams, my running back 20 on the week, going up against the 28th rated Carolina Panthers run defense. They are not a good run defense at all, and Javonte Williams just had a monster game last week against the Saints, who are also not a good run defense, and he has another NFC South cupcake here. The Panthers, without Deontay Johnson, without Adam Thielen in this game, Bryce Young is starting at quarterback. I think the time of possession battle is going to be very easily won by the Denver Broncos, and that means good things for Javonte Williams. The more plays they run, the more rush attempts he's going to have. Unless Bryce Young just doesn't stink anymore, which I don't anticipate, Javonte Williams is getting great work right now. He has 17% and 24% target share the last 2 games. He is productive on the ground. We saw him run all over the New Orleans Saints and have his best game really of his career, at least since his ACL tear for sure. I like Javonte Williams to go higher than his 17.5 receiving yardage total on Underdog, and that completes our entry. We got a 4 pick'em entry here. If you guys want to tail it, you know what to do. Hit the link down below in the pinned comment. Promo code FSE over on Underdog Fantasy gets you up to $1,000 in bonus cash, and it also gets you this new customer special that you can add in and make this a 20x your entry if it ends up hitting. So definitely make sure to tail that if you guys are interested. Moving into RB21, we have James Conner. who is going up against the Miami Dolphins, who are ranked 13th against the fantasy running back position. James Conner and the Arizona Cardinals wish they had Miami the week prior, because this would have been an easy win for them. Instead, you have Tua Tagovailoa coming back, and the Dolphins are actually favored by 3.5 points at home in Miami. Conner was banged up in week 6, but his usage was still that of an RB1 in week 4, in week 5, in week 7. Keep an eye on Trey Benson as a stash candidate for the stretch run, because James Conner has never finished a full season. He's starting to get a little bit banged up. He's a little bit older, but James Conner should get his usual 15 to 20 touches as long as he's out there on the field, even though it's a slightly below average matchup against the Dolphins this week. Moving into Brian Robinson, ranking 9th against the run are the Chicago Bears. Brian Robinson had such a great stretch of games from weeks 1 to 4. He was a top 12 running back, and then he got hurt, and his usage has kind of tapered off, and he's pretty much been a touchdown or bust guy since then. Anytime they're in the red zone, we know number 8's getting the ball, but the carries have disappeared in recent weeks since he's been injured. He's starting to get healthy again. This is the first time since week 4 that he isn't on the injury report at all. Like, he's practicing in full, not listed on the injury report. Bears are a tough defense overall against the pass and against the run. If I had to guess, I think Marcus Mariota will be starting at quarterback. Jaden Daniels probably not going to play in this one, at least in my opinion. But if he is playing, I would probably move him up. All I know is that this team, when they get inside the 5-yard line, they just hand number 8 the ball. And that's where Brian Robinson makes his money. He gets carries, he gets touchdowns. That's what he does. So as long as the offense is functional with Mariota, and again, if Jaden Daniels is playing, this is a non-issue, then he is a guy that I feel comfortable starting as a top 20 running back or top 22 running back where I have him ranked. Tony Pollard as my RB23 this week. He has Mason Rudolph, unfortunately, against the top 6 rated Detroit Lions defense. So that's 2 battles that he's got to fight against. At least with Will Levis, I think Tony Pollard was a little bit better because Will Levis forced defenses to be worried about the threat of the deep ball. Whereas I think with Mason Rudolph, the defense knows that he can't throw the deep ball. He's never going to stretch the defense vertically. He's just a game manager. He's trying to just, throw screen passes and whatever the case is. So I think that's why Tony Pollard is less efficient with Mason Rudolph out there. Defenses can just hone in on him and try and stop the run. Calvin Ridley coming into the game, not really 100% with a foot injury. He's also not playing well. Check down Mason Rudolph. It doesn't scare you as a defense. Detroit should be able to just hone in on the short passing game and the run game. It's a steep battle here. Great workload, though, so I think you have to play him, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tony Pollard had a pretty disappointing game in this one. Running back 24 for me in my rankings, closing out this tier, is Chase Brown, running back of the Cincinnati Bengals. He has been really a newfound workhorse for the Bengals, or at least he's taken over the starting job. Had a down week against the Browns last week. Understandable, because they're a pass funnel defense. You usually want to throw the ball against the Browns, not run the ball against them. The Eagles, though, are not a great matchup for Chase Brown either. It is a great game environment. You got Bengals versus Eagles has a 47-point over-under. 76% of the money is on the over in that game. But Chase Brown has kind of failed to make a dent in some of the important work in this backfield. Zach Moss is still out there on the inside the 10 carries. He's still out there on the long down and distance and 2-minute drill stuff, which is not great for Chase Brown, because if Chase Brown was getting that stuff, he would be not only like a solidified mid RB2, he'd probably be a back end RB1. And the difference between him and a back end RB1 workload, like for example, like J.K. Dobbins is getting, is that J.K. Dobbins gets the 2-minute drill work, he gets the goal line work, and that's not what Chase Brown is getting right now. But I still feel comfortable that he's a top 24 running back play for me this week. Moving into the next tier of running backs, we have the flex plays: Najee Harris, Rachaad White, Tank Bigsby, Tyrone Tracy, Rico Dowdle, and Chuba Hubbard. Starting with Najee Harris, his workload is in flux with Jaylen Warren coming back healthy. So while Najee is producing, he's produced 2 top 15 weeks in a row, which pretty much never happens from Najee Harris. The second his workload disappears, you're going to have a hard time selling him. It's like trying to sell a shitty couch on Facebook Marketplace, where maybe you get lucky and there's that one bum who needs a couch, but for the most part, if Najee's not producing, he's like the shitty couch that nobody wants. So cash out in big weeks when you can. That being said, they are favored to win against the Giants in this game. Below average run defense against the Giants. They are 18th against fantasy running backs. Fire up Najee Harris as a top 25 running back. Running back 26 for me in my rankings is Rachaad White. 5th rated run defense are the Atlanta Falcons. However, they are kind of bad against pass catching running backs, which is where Rachaad White makes his money. Bucky Irving has been mostly out of practice all week with a toe injury. In Wednesday's practice, did not practice. Thursday's did not practice. And then he was limited on Friday. And it says he's going to play in this game. He's probably going to be limited to some degree. Rachaad White last week came back against the Ravens and assumed his full workload for the most part. I mean, he had 10 carries, 6 targets. He looked pretty solid in the passing game, had 29.1 PPR points, ended up catching 2 touchdowns in that game. Remember, though, that this was a great game script for the Buccaneers where they were down the entire game. They're getting wiped by the Ravens. However, the Bucs are underdogs in this game, so they could be down yet again. And as we know, and as I fail to get happy about as a Buccaneers fan, is Chris Godwin's out for the year. Mike Evans is out for the next couple of games. Rachaad White really could step up his role in the receiving game, and that's why I think you could even make the argument of having him too low right now, because with Bucky Irving coming in banged up and Rachaad White being as involved in the receiving game as he is, he could even be a top 24 lock each and every week. Running back 27 for me is Tank Bigsby, who is going up against the 21st ranked Green Bay Packers. I'll probably move him up a little bit if ETN were to be ruled out, but it sounds like ETN is going to play in this game, or at least be limited in this game. Anytime Tank Bigsby gets opportunities, he's been very, very solid. He's had 2 top 10 weeks so far this year, including last week where he was the starting running back and he ran it down the Patriots' throat pretty much the entire game on his way to a 23.8 PPR performance. Like I said, ETN is officially a game-time decision for Sunday's game versus the Packers. The single highest scoring game on the slate, though, 49.5 point over-under, and the Jags are actually even implied for 23 of those points. You'd think the Packers would be a bigger favorite than just 4 points, but that's what the spread is right now. If ETN is ruled out, I would slot Tank Bigsby right around that like James Conner, Javonte Williams RB2 range, because I think Tank Bigsby would be a much better start in that situation. Next up, we have my RB28, which is Chuba Hubbard. Like I said, it appears that Jonathan Brooks is 1 more week away from making his debut. You could argue that I have Hubbard too low given the workload that he's seen. He's been over 82% of the snaps in back-to-back games, but he did get shut down against the Commanders last week, and I think the reason for that is they're able to hone in on the run game, shut down Chuba Hubbard, and once you do that, this offense is useless. Now, you take aside the fact that Deontay Johnson's not playing this week and Andy Dalton isn't starting this week. I think there's a very good chance that the Panthers score 3 points or something like that. Like, I don't think this is going to be a very good offensive performance from the Panthers, which is why I have Chuba Hubbard ranked so low given the workload. And also, they're playing the Denver Broncos, who are 11th against the run, and they're on the road against Denver, and this is just a really good defense in general. I'd love to say he's got one more great week in him, Chuba Hubbard, but it's not looking great here in my opinion. So I don't think Chuba Hubbard is a must-start as good as he's been so far this year. I mean, he's the RB10 on the season. I don't think this is a great spot for him so far. Running back 29 for me is Tyrone Tracy, running back of the New York Giants. 24th ranked defense are the Pittsburgh Steelers against fantasy running backs. Tyrone Tracy took over the backfield last week, I think, at least 67% of the snaps, 68% of the routes. Devin Singletary was not nearly as involved as he usually is. We don't know if this was Devin Singletary is being eased in because he's coming off of an injury, or if this was changing of the guard. This is Tracy's backfield now. We're going to have to find out that this week when it's a little bit more of a closer game, and also the fact that, like I said, Tyrone Tracy has been the healthy one and Singletary has not been healthy. Either way, if you had to start one of these running backs, it is Tyrone Tracy right now. Terrible game environment, 36.5 point over-under. Steelers are quietly worse against the run than you'd think, though, and explosive runs have been able to beat them, as we saw last week on Sunday Night Football. Breece Hall able to break off a couple big plays. I think Tyrone Tracy could do the same in this one. So he's a half-decent start, but again, keep in mind, he's not just like this locked and loaded RB2 now, because I'm still worried that Singletary might have a bigger role than people are thinking after last week. Running back 30 for me is Rico Dowdle, running back of the Dallas Cowboys. 15th ranked defense are the San Francisco 49ers on Sunday Night Football. Before the bye, Rico Dowdle was virtually like phased out of the game plan in week 6, trending well usage-wise for a couple weeks before that, and then randomly he just decides to not give Mike McCarthy, whoever was calling the plays there, decides to not give Rico Dowdle any snaps. Both Jerry Jones and Mike McCarthy said that he needs to be out there more, which is good news. The 49ers are a league average run defense right now, and the Cowboys are basically fighting for their season. They're 3-3. They're hoping that they can catch up in their division. They're currently 3rd in it right now. I think they'll put up a good performance on Sunday night. We don't have Micah Parsons on the defensive side of the ball. They're still without a lot of players right now, specifically on defense, and that means San Francisco is going to score points. So for me, I think that the Cowboys are going to have to score points to be able to remain competitive in this game. So Rico Dowdle, I like him as a pretty solid option. Now let's get into the deep league flex plays, and these options are a lot better than they usually are because we're, in a position where there's no teams on bye this week. Running back 31 for me is Rhamondre Stevenson. I think he's a great buy low right now, has a lot of meat left on the bone to start producing. The Patriots offense was functional in week 1, in week 2, in week 5, and last week. And in 3 of those 4 games, Rhamondre Stevenson was outstanding, and Stevenson last week only played limited because he didn't practice Thursday, didn't practice Wednesday, practiced in a limited capacity on Friday in a foreign country on, 6-hour time change in England, and barely got any work. He only had like 50% of the snaps. I think this week is the week we see him kind of adjust himself back to his normal workload. He's not injured anymore. He was taken off the injury report before Friday's practice. So I think Rhamondre Stevenson is going to have a big bounce back this week against the Jets, or at least from a usage standpoint. So if you want to go buy low on a running back right now, Stevenson to me seems like the perfect guy to do that with. Running back 32 for me is Nick Chubb. 22nd ranked defense are the Baltimore Ravens. It's still a ramp-up period for Nick Chubb right now, so even though I believe Jerome Ford is probably going to be out again this week, he's only a viable top 36 play as opposed to top 24 or whatever like he normally would be. He's likely limited to 50% of the snaps at most because he's still ramping up from the ACL tear, which usually, according to most doctors, takes about 2 to 4 weeks, especially when it's a multi-ligament tear like he's had. We'll see what Jameis Winston can do with this offense. Hopefully, it is an improvement for the Cleveland Browns. Running back 33 for me is Alexander Mattison. Excellent workload. Last week even continued despite Zamir White playing. However, similar to the Tracy situation, Zamir White only played 13% of the snaps coming off of a multi-week injury. So how does Zamir White coming back to a full workload, or at least however much they want him to get the ball, look like in week 8? This week will be the telling week for what Alexander Mattison's role looks like going forward. I actually recently made a trade for him in our Flock League. Maybe I'm buying high on him. Maybe I'm buying low on him. I don't know. Good chance we see less of a workload this week because I think Zamir White will be more involved, and it's a really bad matchup. The Kansas City Chiefs are 4th against fantasy running backs, but in that league, if you guys are following that channel, I have no RB2. I have nothing at that position. So Alexander Mattison, at least a startable workload guy. He's been over 15 PPR points in back-to-back weeks. Running back 34 for me is Bucky Irving. Like I said, he would be higher, but he's been very limited in practice all week. Definitely not a must start. I would stick with Rachaad White of the two of them if you had to start one of these two running backs. And then closing out this video, we have RB35 for me, Tyler Algier. High-scoring game. Algier is good for 8 to 15 very efficient touches every single week. And who knows, maybe we're getting stomped, the Buccaneers, in the 4th quarter, and Algier's got to grind it out in the 4th quarter. That would be where he would get his value. We saw that back in week 6 against the Carolina Panthers. He had a very, very productive day as a result of that. Raheem Mostert is my RB36. We haven't really heard his name all season because he was banged up for a while, and then Tua got injured, and he was pretty much useless after that. If you needed running back help also, and you were really, really desperate at the position, I actually think Mostert's not a half-decent buy low, or maybe he's even available on your waiver wire right now. I do think he could be relevant with Tua Tagovailoa coming back. Coming into the season, you got to think about where we were with this Dolphins offense. We thought it was going to be Achane and Mostert. They were going to be the engines of this offense, and we haven't seen that this year because of the injuries that they've suffered, both to Mostert himself and to Tua Tagovailoa. So I think he actually has a chance to get back on track against the 20th ranked Arizona defense. So like I said, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like down below. If I helped you set your fantasy football lineup, subscribe to the channel as well. If you do want to tail the entry that we built out throughout this video, Kareem Hunt's yardage, James Cook's yardage, David Montgomery to find the end zone, and Javonte Williams higher than 17.5 receiving yards, make sure to head on over to Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up. If you already have an account, there's probably profit boost tokens for the NBA going right now. MLB, they have, and during Boosttober, they have profit boost tokens all the time. And it's not just limited to NFL. They have it for college football. They have it for NBA. They have it for MLB. They have it for NHL stuff. So make sure you're checking your Pick'em lobby as soon as possible. And also, if you are new to Underdog Fantasy, you can add in this Dak Prescott free square and make this entry a 20x if it ends up hitting. You can put in $10 and win up to 200 if this entry goes nuclear for us. So if you guys want to tail that, go ahead and do it. Link down below in the pinned comment to tail us on Underdog Fantasy, and make sure you're checking out everything we're doing over on flockfantasy.com. Us and the other creators are constantly pumping out content related to our rankings, rest of season, dynasty, trade value charts, all that good stuff. If you're interested in that, team reviews, ask us a question over there. Hit the link down below in the pinned comment as well to check out flockfantasy.com. We have a trade calculator that is free, a trade finder tool that is free, our expert rankings on a weekly basis, and rest of season rankings are free. But if you want my specific opinion, you do have to become a subscriber subscriber over there, but promo code FSE gets you 7 days for free, 30% off any of the packages. Annual Motherflocker tier subscribers also get a free team review, so I can break down your redraft or your dynasty roster, and 6 months for free when they sign up annually as well. So if that interests you, link down below in the pinned comment. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.